Hi, I'm Robin Elander, and I'm here with Dean Axelrod. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well this morning.
Good. Dean has been a lawyer, has started multiple businesses. He's also been a financial advisor, and now is currently working in philanthropic giving at Direct Relief. You have lived like 10 lives in one. I am so excited to learn more about your background, what you're passionate about, and just learn some insights from you.
Okay.
Can
Where
you
would you like to start?
can you tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you how some of these things connected and brought you to now?
Wow, that's a good question because there's a lot to it. My career has taken a lot of interesting turns, and most of them were not planned. And I think the one aspect of my professional background that I think has influenced my career is early on having embraced the fact that the world changes around you. You don't always control, you make plans and they don't always play out, but that they can build on each other, and that change isn't necessarily a bad thing. And in my experience, it's been very productive and it's been a very good thing. You asked me what I'm passionate about. I think ultimately when I look back at my career, what has driven me has been community, has been finding ways to help people, but not always in the most obvious way that you might think. When you think of, I want to help people in my work, I want to help people in my life, it's not always about charitable help or philanthropic or humanitarian work. Sometimes it's simply how you treat your employees, being a good coach and a mentor, and that's part of what good leadership is. It's how you treat the people you do business with, finding ways to be supportive even of your vendors. You can help them do their work better in the way you interact with them. So I think building community has always been important, and it's always been a driver, and helping other people be the best that they can be in their work, and helping them find meaning in what they do.
Wonderful. Because you have started quite a number of different businesses, started new roles, can you talk a little bit about how you might have gone about starting these things and kind of put yourself into these new roles and allowed for that change in your life and to grow those initiatives?
Sure. Each one is a little bit different. And some of the new things that I've done were working for somebody else, working for a company. Sometimes it was starting my own business. And depending on the nature of the business and whether I'm working for myself or someone else, that kind of influences the approach. But at the essence, one of the things they have in common, I think, is really just doing some basic homework to get started. Knowing you don't have to know everything about the industry you're getting into, but understanding it enough to know what you bring and what you contribute, because the people around you may not fully appreciate what you bring, and they may have some skepticism. So your own confidence about what your skill set is and what you bring that may not be obvious is really important, and that may be the common thread. I think often about a position that I started, and I thought I was perfectly suited for it, and I thought it would be obvious that I was perfectly suited for it. But the manager who was hiring said, I don't know, maybe. And I just had to look him in the eye and say, I'm based on what I've done before, I know that I will learn everything I need to learn about this industry, which was his concern. I hadn't worked in that industry. And I said, I know from my experience that in 3 months, I'll know everything I need to know about the industry. But what you're looking for is someone who's able to work with people, who understands other aspects of the work that are not necessarily industry specific. And I think I was truly confident about that, and I was able to convey that to him, which gave him the confidence to hire me for the position.
Interesting. And since you've worked in as a financial advisor, actually my financial advisor for a little while, can you just share a little bit about why it's important to invest in yourself and your company so that, what's the meaning for that in your life,
Mm.
in kind of your client's life at the time?
Yeah, taking care of yourself seems obvious, but it really isn't. And I'm reminded of an experience I had when I was a teenager. I took a junior life-saving course so that I could work as a lifeguard at the swimming pool. And the one lesson that I remember more than anything from that experience was, if you see someone struggling out in the water, make sure it's safe for you
Mhm.
before you go out and try to help somebody else. And that really stuck with me. And I think my work as a financial advisor and my work when I was practicing law, it was really important to, first of all, for myself to remember that I needed to take care of my own needs. It's very easy, if you're interested in helping other people, if that's what motivates you, it's easy to get so caught up in their needs that you forget to take care of yourself. But you can take care of others better when you take care of yourself as well. And in my work as a financial advisor, I had the opportunity to engage with clients who felt there were often probably a couple of primary scenarios. One was, oh, I have plenty of time. I'm still young. I'm just getting started, and I need to put everything I have into my business. That may be the most common reason why young entrepreneurs don't invest in themselves financially and invest in their future, because they feel they have plenty of time. I know from my own experience, the time goes very, very quickly,
Sure.
and you don't have as much as you think. And the power of time in investing is something that you can't necessarily make up for later. The power of interest earning interest is a fundamental aspect of financial planning. So to take care of yourself means you can take care of other things better. If you're insecure financially, you have a tendency to communicate that unconsciously to the people around you, and your insecurity will be clear, and you won't have that personal confidence, and the people you're working with may have less confidence in you. And so I do think it is fundamental. And one day you're going to get to a point, and this also happens when you're young and you're starting out, you imagine, well, I'll just work until I die. I'll work until I'm 80. That'll be fine. And it's easy to think that when you're 30, but when you're 50, it starts to look a little less realistic, and you start to realize it's not as easy. And the success stories, the people you hear about, everybody knows or has heard about someone who, stayed energetic and vibrant and dynamic and never stopped working and loved it, and it worked out great. But there aren't that many of those stories. And life is full of surprises and challenges. And really, in the world we live in, having a financial cushion can make the difference between making it and not making it in so many ways. So, I remember a point in my life where I could not have launched my law practice when I started that business if I didn't have enough money in the bank. Not only to give me confidence, but to run the business.
Mm-hmm.
So it truly gives you options. And so I would really urge anyone who is starting out, whether in a career where you're working for someone else and you think you have a reliable paycheck and you're not going to have to worry too much, life is full of surprises. But more importantly, if you're working for yourself, please make sure that you are building into your strategy, putting something aside. You're not really being successful if you're not taking your own financial needs into account as a legitimate business cost. When you're doing your projections, you've got your rent, you've got your supplies, all of those things that you are budgeting for. You need to budget for your own welfare, paying yourself a reasonable amount and investing in your future.
Because it's all ultimately investing in the community. Because if you show up in a place where you're able to give more, you can give more, and you have the ability to do that. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's so important. It's been important for me. And I feel like if everybody has someone like Dean or a financial advisor in their life to meet with, once a year or once a couple times a year, to learn and to grow. You don't have to even know what you're doing to get started. And in fact, that's why you bring somebody on to your team. One of the course modules is really developing your successful team in this course.
Right.
And that really starts closest, and then it moves out into the community, and there's like a combination there. It's like your closest person, and then it's also it connects with the community. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I can't wait for that module.
Yeah.
I've been watching it eagerly. I'm sure I'll learn a few things.
Awesome. It just actually went out this week.
Okay.
And then because you're working at Direct Relief, a very innovative nonprofit,
Right.
can you share some of the insights that you've learned working with this organization, and a little bit about how people might want to start a fundraising campaign, or some of the key elements of that, because it's a big part of events and new projects and just growing the financial foundation of an organization.
Right. Well, there's a lot there.
Sure.
And we could probably turn that into
an
entire module in your
couple
program.
tidbits.
But putting it in the context of what working at Direct Relief has offered in terms of my toolkit. When we were talking earlier, I mentioned that in the course of my career, I've found that everything I had done before fed into what I was doing in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And every step of the way, you learn things. Every new endeavor you take on is going to have unknowns, and you're going to have to figure them out and learn and draw on what you bring with you. And so I didn't know everything there was to know about the work I'm doing at Direct Relief when I started. And Direct Relief is a very interesting organization. And so I think the first thing I want to share is that the answer to that question will depend in part on the nature of the project or the organization you are running or working for. Direct Relief is a humanitarian charity. It's a global and national charitable organization that provides medical support for doctors and nurses, facilities that are providing care for the most vulnerable people in their communities, responding to natural disasters, as well as providing ongoing support for under-resourced health facilities. That context is important, and it's been around since 1948 here in Santa Barbara. And jumping into an organization when it's already 70 years old is different from starting something new.
For sure.
So some of the lessons I've learned will take a little bit of tweaking to apply depending on the situation that you're in. So I would say, to begin with, if you're thinking in terms of raising money and sponsorship for a large-scale community event, the first thing to remember is that that isn't exactly the same thing as raising annual operating funds. So if we focus on event sponsorships, probably the most important thing I would say to start with actually is the same thing you should be thinking about if you're raising annual operating revenues for your organization, and that is truly understand why you're doing what you do.
Mm-hmm.
For an organization, if Direct Relief is building relationships in the community, we need financial support. The most important thing that our supporters need to know is why we do what we do and why it's important. That respectful interaction and that respectful engagement of sharing information and allowing others to make a decision for themselves about whether to support your effort, I think is a far more respectful way to engage your community than to come on hard with the message of give, give, give. You need to give because I think this is important. And if I think it's important, you should think it's important.
Mm-hmm.
So I would suggest that you begin the process by having conversations and making sure you know what's important to your community. If you've brought an idea to a community that might be ahead of its time, you may need to spend a little more time getting the community on board before you start asking for money. And often there are a few people who will catch on early and be supportive, and they may be able to be the ones who sort of prime the pump. Their involvement will inspire the rest of the community. Even if they aren't making an initial financial commitment, their moral support will be very important, and building on those relationships. So I think, that's the place to begin.
And it's about the quality of the program first, right? And then it's bringing people to the table through the quality of the program. Is that a little bit of what you're going for as well?
I think it's easier to make the case when you have something to show rather than something that's purely aspirational. Now, when you're starting any new business or a new project or maybe launching a new event, you only have your vision. But the more concrete you can make that vision, the more you can describe it in a way that allows your community, the people you're trying to engage, to picture it for themselves and see themselves in it and see how their community may benefit. Being a good storyteller really matters, because a good storyteller can paint a vivid picture that allows someone to see and experience something that doesn't exist yet. But if you have something demonstrable, that goes a long way. Showing people what you have done somehow is often more compelling than simply talking about what you think you want to do.
Right.
Execution really matters. And maybe this is part of what you were thinking about with that question. Focusing on execution allows everything else to fall into place. Most people know the adage, do it right the first time, or what's the carpenter's expression, measure twice and cut once. And if you're in a production type of business, you know that it costs a lot more to fix something that you didn't make right the first time, right? So it depends on your metrics. If you work in an environment where you're being incentivized on volume and not on returns, then you produce a lot and you may end up with a lot of returns too. In the relationship business, I don't think that works. And I think that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about relationships and community. So focusing on execution, I think in large part, that's what has enabled Direct Relief to be successful over the years. Being respectful of the people we're trying to serve, being respectful of our donors. When you're planning a large scale event in a community, first and foremost, respect for the community. And how do you earn respect? You earn it by giving it, and you earn it by listening and being responsive. And if you can remember, do quality work every time, that's job number one, and treat your community and individuals with respect, I think you will see that the rest starts to fall into place pretty easily and naturally.
You were talking earlier about your potential donors, your community members as stakeholders, and how you ask them and bring them into your project. Can you talk about a couple ways that you've done that, as well as you're also the current president of Rotary, and you just had a recent initiative, you're asking your members for feedback.
Right.
What kinds of ways have you asked for feedback, and how to build that trust?
It's not really complicated. It's really doing what we're doing right here. It's being willing to listen. It's knowing that you might have good ideas, but they might not be as good as you think they are. And a good idea isn't always the right idea at that time, in that place, for those individuals. And so simply asking questions and truly listening. When I first started at Direct Relief, one of the first things I did was I started calling donors. I looked to see who was a regular supporter of the organization. They didn't have to be the largest donors, but I was trying to get a sense of who seems to have a real passion for the organization, and reaching out to them to introduce myself and to find out why they support Direct Relief. And when I became president of the Rotary Club of Santa Barbara, in fact, leading up to the beginning of my term, I spent many months talking to not just the most active members, but sometimes the least active members. And again, at Direct Relief, I began with the what seemed sort of obvious, to reach out to the people who were already most engaged. But the next thing I did was I looked for people who had been engaged and didn't seem to be anymore, at least through their giving patterns. They might have been very engaged in terms of following the work we were doing and talking to other people about what we do. So being aware of the assumptions you make. Just because someone isn't giving money this year doesn't mean that they don't care or aren't interested. So in the Rotary Club, I did the same thing. And I just asked questions. I asked what to them made a great club. Why do you give to the organization you give to? Why do you give to Direct Relief? That begins a wonderful conversation. And sometimes it takes interesting and surprising turns. And sometimes it's simple and straightforward. But what you take away, if you genuinely are asking the question because you care and you want to engage them in a way that's meaningful to them, you need to hear what's important to them. And you also need to remember that sometimes they don't know things that you know. So they may not know that there's a way to be involved that they don't know about. At Direct Relief, people like to volunteer. They want their engagement to be, in some cases, only in terms of volunteering. They don't feel they're in a position to make a financial contribution, but they want to help. And the organization has changed a lot in 70 years, and there aren't as many volunteer opportunities as there once were to be hands-on in the warehouse, packing boxes of medicine. But there are many ways for people who care to volunteer. And so part of my job is to help them figure it out. So for example, being an ambassador for the organization, which is, kind of a term that, may not be the most exciting, idea, but I think conceptually it's about doing your part just as a private citizen to represent something you care about. If you hear your favorite musician, and that music really fills you with passion and excitement, you want to tell your friends about it.
Right.
That's being an ambassador. You've just chosen to do it without that musician asking you to. And at Direct Relief, one of the ways people can volunteer and help is by simply following our social media and our news feed and sharing it with others who might be interested in this kind of work. As an event planner, one of the ways I think you may be able to engage your community and finding ways for them to be involved is to give them things to do that they may not have ever thought of because it may be unconventional. They only know what they know, and they only know what they've been exposed to. So if you can help them find things that they would consider fun and meaningful and are actually useful.
People like to have fun.
People love to have fun, first and foremost. I think about probably one of my greatest lessons in this area is the video gaming community, streaming video gamers who raise tremendous amounts of money for Direct Relief simply by having fun.
Wow, how about that?
And I think there are probably more and more opportunities in other areas, and possibly even in large-scale event planning. When you're trying to get community support, bring some people together who may not be the obvious ones to be involved. And if they seem like they're interested, ask them how they'd like to be involved or how they think they can help. They're going to come up with ideas that you would never have thought of, and it will open up all kinds of possibilities, and it will truly build community.
And because you're asking them what they want to do, you're not inviting them to you might be inviting them to something, but you are asking how they would like to engage. Right. And that's a whole different kind of game.
It is. Now, there's also something important to keep in mind. It's going back to, you have to take care of yourself, you have to take care of your organization and your project. And an idea that somebody has that they may be really excited about might not be a good fit. So you have to be willing to go slowly, think carefully, ask questions, and the answer might be, that's a great idea. Let me think about how we might be able to work that in, and then come back. You don't have to make a decision in the moment. Patience and careful steps. Remember, focusing on execution. Something that I think is important to remember. We all have our personalities. We have our social personalities and we have our work personalities. Sometimes they're the same, but sometimes they're a little different. And I know that in my experience, I'm very entrepreneurial. I love a new idea. I never met a new idea that I didn't like. But that doesn't mean that they're always practical or
Right, very true.
implementable ideas. And so I need in my team, you were talking about building a team. I know that I need someone on my team who can, without totally throwing cold water on it, say, okay, Dean, let's think that through. How would we make that work? How does that fit?
What are you talking about right now?
And other people are the opposite. Other people are much more cautious. Other people are much more focused on structure and systems and administrative processes. And they need someone who can help get them maybe out of their comfort zone, to be comfortable with a little bit of uncertainty,
Yes, yeah.
to be able to dive in.
The last question I have for you is, you know, a lot of what you talked about is relationship building, and we know how important that is. How important are like the marketing collateral pieces, the video, the slickness of your website and all of that stuff? Is that as important, less important? You know, in your experience, how does that play a role in this whole space? Because, you know, sometimes people get caught up on, you know, having to have something perfect. It does, I do believe it does play a role. You want to present your organization well, but in your experience, what's that balance?
Well, I think the most important thing to think about is why you want the materials, why you want the collateral. If you don't fully understand how you're going to use it or what you think the results of having that material will be, then you're getting ahead of yourself. So I begin with, what do I want to accomplish? Then I figure out, what do I need to accomplish it? And if part of the answer to the question is, I need a website or I need a brochure, I have to pause and then ask, well, am I saying that just because it's conventional wisdom? Or am I saying it because I actually have thought about and asked questions and I understand how I'm going to be engaging with people? So let me give you an example. When I was working as a financial advisor, I had all kinds of wonderful collateral material available to me. And I had a website through the company, and I put little information packets together. And initially, it was very easy to accumulate all that information and organize my flyers and put them into folders and have all that stuff ready. When really that was just a way to procrastinate doing the difficult work of getting out and meeting people and shaking hands. On the other hand, the nature of your work might be that you're introducing your project to someone who's going to need some time to think about it. Sometimes leaving them with something is just a mental trigger that will remind them of what the conversation was about. So more important than the actual material, although it needs to be done well, it still needs to look good, thinking about, what's that conversation going to sound like? What do I want to say? What do I want to hear? What questions do I want to ask? And then the brochure you leave, odds are no one's going to read the brochure. I mean, when you get a brochure, what do you do with it? You don't have to answer the question, right? They get filed or they get thrown away. Eventually they get thrown away. Whether they get filed first or not is the question. Are you driving traffic to your website? Are you doing things consciously to get people to your website? And once they get there, what are you doing with that? How are you engaging with them? So I think the answer to the question is, it will really depend on what you're doing and how you've thought it through. I have seen a lot of success from people who don't use a lot of collateral material, because their relationships, their interpersonal contacts are very meaningful. So know what you need it for, know how you'll use it. And this, again, this could be another half hour, an hour long conversation about how to use collateral to effectively build support, to effectively raise money, to effectively build your business. What I'll leave you with now is, just make sure it's strategic. Make sure you know what you're trying to accomplish and how you use the tool. It's like saying, you know, I'm going to go build a house, so I better have a box of tools, but they better be the right tools. If they're staplers and hole punches and things that I have at my office, they're not going to help, but it will still be a bag of tools. So think strategically.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise. That's great feedback. And thanks for all you're doing in the community. You have so much goodness going on, and I'm just so appreciative.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. This has been a fun conversation, and
Awesome.
look forward to see where things go.
Fabulous. Thank you.